Hello. So much pressure with the countdown. Like we're doing a news program.
So much fun.
Dr. Nicole, hello.
Hello, Diana. It's so good to see you.
It's so great to see you. Okay, to the people who are joining us, let me tell them what's happening. Uh, we are two professional keynote speakers who wanted to share how we think about putting together a presentation to make an impact. You don't have to be a keynote speaker to get value out of the session. And I think we come at it from two very, very different angles in that, like, we don't coach people. I don't think you coach people on how to give presentations, but it is something that we think about every single day. And I think we have a lot of value to add to the people that are joining us today.
Yeah, I've been speaking since I was a kindergartner.
Oh my gosh.
How long have you been giving speeches?
I actually come at it from the opposite. Like in grade school, I didn't speak. I was very shy. All my yearbooks were signed only by teachers who said, "Hey, you should speak up more." And here we are. I'm the opposite of that now.
And I was, how about sometimes you give other people space and opportunity to talk?
What a perfect combination we are.
Yes, I'm so glad that we're together talking about this today.
Yeah, so if you're joining us, please in the comments think about questions that you have of how we can help you make your speech more impactful. We have a couple of great questions that people have submitted already ahead of time. We have questions for one another, but I thought we could start by talking about the different angles that we come to presentations with. You have a brand new book out on empathy, and I just want to know, tell me how empathy relates to giving a great presentation.
If we start with the definition of empathy, I know because people have different ones, Diana. Ideally, the one that I think can be taught is that we have the ability to view things from another person's point of view. And that helps us make better decisions. So when I think about giving a keynote, I am always imagining I'm the person sitting in the audience. And if I am that person, what would I want? So I tend to think about how to speak in a way that people are getting what they need, whatever, whatever that is. So instead of always thinking about what's the message I'm trying to convey, I start with what do people need and what do they want to hear?
And how does that translate? So you just gave a huge keynote in front of 2,000 people.
Yeah.
How did you prepare for that presentation, and how did you use empathy to help you?
Yeah. So in my regular practice of work, I know that people struggle with vulnerability. I know that people have imposter syndrome, if you believe in that term. I know people lack confidence. And so I generally will stand on stage and say, it's nothing for me to tell a joke about my Spanx or to tell a joke about even the topic and how I might not have been the best at it. Because I'm not sure that I build people's confidence by starting with, oh, look at how amazing I am in this particular area, and you need to get like me. The world would be better if you could get like me. So when I was telling my empathy story, I really started out with how bad I was and how patient other people were as I was learning on my journey. And then I gave kind of my 3 points that I wanted. And people tend to resonate with that. And it's nothing but empathy. It's an empathetic way to talk to people.
You know, what's funny, like before we went live, we were talking about when we first met, and you were talking about dates and you were like, "Oh, that was before I was empathetic." Like, can you tell me what happened to make you empathetic? Like, how did you become empathetic?
Yeah, so I think there's two ways to become empathetic. One is through training classes, which is what I'm out here trying to do with people. But that emotional empathy, that cognitive empathy or affective empathy, I think that it's hard to teach. And that is being able to connect with the emotions of another person. And the day I met you, you proclaim it to be one of the worst days of your
It's true.
life.
It's a fact.
And before we had the conversation, I'm like, wait, do I remember what you were feeling? And then you said, oh, you came to me and you mentioned it. And so I was like, oh, maybe I did.
Yeah.
But today, because of the death of my mom and some discovery about being or having a non-paternity event and just a lot of other heartbreaking experiences, I can now recognize emotion in another person, good and bad.
Hmm.
See it in the eyes. It doesn't matter what they say. I can say, "How are you?" And a person goes, "Fine," and I'm going, "Mm-mm, not fine, not fine,
Yeah.
not fine."
So the day we met, just to share with people, we were both giving a keynote at a large organization, and it was one of the lowest days of my life because maybe 2 days before that, my husband had publicly announced his suicidal thoughts and his withdrawal from public service and just like professional life in general to go get treatment. And 2 days later, I had to go give a speech about curiosity and innovation,
And you
and
did a fantastic job, by the way. I am still moved today by what an amazing job you did because that was a hard audience.
well, let me tell you how I think about giving presentations. And we each have a new book out. Dr. Nicole's is about empathy. Mine is about how to give memorable presentations. And thankfully, like, thanks for setting me up that it was memorable. You still
Yes,
remember
you
it.
scored.
But it's exactly what you said earlier, which is you don't think about the message, but you think about how you're going to deliver it.
Yes.
And the memorable moments happen in how you deliver the message, not what it is that you're saying. And
Yes.
I actually think that if we're going to talk about how to be memorable, we need to understand how forgetting works. Okay? So the research shows that an hour after your presentation, your pitch, whatever, your audience will forget 50% of it. And a week after your presentation, they will forget 90%. And you don't get to choose the 10% they remember. They'll be like, she did this funny thing on stage. She almost tripped walking up for me. She tripped walking up the stairs. So you don't get to pick the 10%. And the only way that you get to influence that curve is if you can create moments of emotion in the presentation
Mhm.
that will directly correlate with their memory. So our emotions and our memories are tied together. That's why you can remember like every single part of the day you got married or had a kid, or even September 11th, 2001. Like, you can remember every single portion of that day because your emotions were spiked on that day. And if when we're giving a presentation, we can find these moments of taking them to a higher level, we can sear ideas into their memory at a much longer rate. So
tell me this. So how do you evoke emotion when you're presenting then?
yeah, I actually want to show people how I think about my presentation. Do you ever see those when politicians debate one another on the bottom of the screen? They have those dials where people are like, this is good, or I'm bored now, I'm not listening. I think people should plot out. I made a little chart. I'm putting it over my forehead. So you have a beginning, a middle, and end to your presentation. And I think you should think about the highs and lows of, oh, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
The highs and lows of where those emotional peaks and lulls will happen in your presentation, and to draw it out beforehand. So come back. Yeah, thank you. But that's how I plot it out. I'm like, okay, what am I going to do in the first 30 seconds? I think that's a huge opportunity. What am I going to do at the end? That's kind of the order that I think about it. And then what are those things I'm going to do in the middle? So let me ask you, like, what I think the opening, the first 30 seconds is your opportunity for them to say, oh, I want to pay attention to this.
Oh yeah. Yeah. You got to catch people in the first 30 seconds for sure. I like to make people laugh in the first 30 seconds. How do you use your first 30?
I want to hear more. I want to hear more about how you think about it. Like, when you're planning ahead of time, you have a presentation, like how do you think about that first moment?
I study some of the best world speakers throughout history. And I like how Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King used to speak. And it would be this, let me define what the problem is. And people are emotionally low. And then he would always bring people up and out of that. And so I tell people what the problem is, and then give them some opportunities for what solutions are. But they're laughing.
Yeah.
So if I'm thinking into emotion, I'm having them be happy about, and I'm usually making fun of myself. And then I like to leave people with this inspirational, really big, hairy, audacious idea using Jim Collins' work that yes, they can help join this revolution that we're trying to launch. So that's how I think about it. But I'd be curious to know, does that fit the theory that you studied?
Absolutely. And do you see how you did this with your finger?
Oh
It's
yeah,
almost like you're thinking about it like a song. Do you know
yeah,
what I'm saying? The rhythm of how, and then it's like high at the end.
yeah.
And that's how people need to be thinking about, don't like, it's not even keynotes. It's whatever presentation you have to your team. Like, we're going to talk about the beginning and the end and the middle, but you don't want to start it with, okay, is everybody here? Is like, what's everybody up to? Everybody sound off. Like, what a boring way to start. Immediately, they're judging in the first 30 seconds whether this is something they've seen or experienced before. And if it is, then they'll check their email. Like,
have you been in those presentations where the first 30 seconds is all, thank you very much for having me, and I want to honor this person and acknowledge this person, and oh my gosh, it's so respectful,
yes.
but you really I get lost in that. What's
Yeah,
your
everybody gets lost in it. And it's so terrible to say, don't thank people. But
yes,
don't thank people. Like, it'll lose the audience.
yes.
I think people overestimate how much they have the audience. Don't you think that?
I think so. It's like all of that thank yous and the one person whose name you're saying, they're all in, but everybody else is completely out.
Yeah. So the first thing I think about, the first sentence that I'm going to say, and usually when I do the curiosity presentation, it's usually a question.
Okay.
So the first thing I say in my curiosity keynote is I'll say, who is this? And I have a picture of Snoop Dogg up on the screen. And then we talk about Snoop Dogg. And then they're like, this is unlike any business presentation I've been a part of, so
Let me pay attention.
I'll lean forward. I'll put my phone down for a second, and in my Go Big or Go Home keynote, the one on making memorable presentations, I start with us as a room making a sound together. I say, what does it feel like when somebody's pitching you? Like, you open the front door and there's somebody standing there with a clipboard and they say like, you've been pre-approved. And then I say, can we make as a group the sound of that on the count of 3? Let's do it together. Okay. So like 1, 2, 3. What does that feel like? Ugh, not great.
Mm-mm.
And that is a terrible sound. Now, you didn't do it with me.
I didn't do it with you.
Yeah.
But
What does it feel like
in your presentation?
when somebody's pitching you?
I just don't like it. I don't know. I don't like to be pitched.
Yeah,
like,
you don't want people to feel that way.
No,
you want them to feel a different sound. So now we as a group are doing an activity together, as opposed to like, let me give you an outline of what I'm going to talk about. I'm going to teach you how to create memorable presentations. No, you have to be like in the middle of it, I think, right at the very beginning.
Yeah. And I don't know that I learned this formally. I think I just have watched people that I really like to hear speak. And they usually say something that's like so profound at the very, very beginning that it's like, oh my goodness. Looks like we got a question from David Bell. Do you ever permit the listeners to reach the conclusion that you want them to without telling them? You want them to conclude D, but you only give them A, B, and C.
I will tell you, I think it's much more powerful if you can figure out how to get them to say your message to themselves than for you to say it to them. So I agree with David. Sometimes it's good after they say it to themselves for you to reiterate it, just to make sure we're all on the same page.
Yeah.
But I do like it when they say it to themselves first. What about you?
Yeah, I am a fan of I would call you telling them, preaching. That's what I think the difference is between giving a presentation and preaching. Preaching is very much telling people what you want them to think, feel, or believe. And I think that being a successful presenter is about inviting people into an idea and allowing them to decide what they want to do with that idea. And I don't know, it gets pretty good reviews every time I get a chance to do it that way.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
I have a question for you. So a lot of people say to me like, well, I'm not worried about being on stage and speaking to others. And I want to be like, well, that's not the bar of giving a good presentation.
Whether you're worried.
How did you know you needed to get better? And how do you think about getting better now as a presenter?
Oh my God. I don't think about anything else except for being better at my craft of trying to teach ideas to adults. I mean, I'm usually just in front of adults. Um, and that question is hard for me to answer because I truly have been a speaker since I was 4 or 5 years old. And the roar of the crowd is addictive to me. And I know it. I know that it's a thing. Everybody's got their thing. That's what it is for me. And so I always want to, one, I think we need more empathy in the world in general. So I think the message is one that needs to get out. But how effectively does it get out if the people who think, no, we need more tough love and people are lazy and the last thing we need is empathy, which is what somebody said in the grocery store the other day, by the way. If those people are great at conveying their message, I don't feel like I'm making the world a better place. So it is on me as the presenter to try to do everything I can to speak in a way that people can hear it. And yeah, so I think about it all the time. What about you?
I will promise to answer it, but like, how do you think about getting better? How do you get input? I just want, like, from two people who do this professionally,
Yeah.
how we think about getting better as presenters and
Yeah.
why it's so important.
So this is bad. I do not recommend, but this is what I do if I'm just being honest. When I get the survey feedbacks, the first survey feedback, if I got a 4.86 out of 5, I want to know what happened to the other 0.14. So I'm going to go and look and see what those people had to say. And I think, the good parts about it, I say, how can I weave this into my approach? The bad parts about it, I kick it out. And then I lean into, and I do it in this order, then I lean into who was happiest and why, and how can I do more of that and do more of the good things and less of the bad things, instead of looking at feedback as, I look at it as a way to just really iterate and get better. I'm honest about this. I study the people who I go, man, I just love to hear them speak. I study what they do, like break it down technically.
Yeah. How did they do this part? I do the same thing when I listen to somebody. Like, if you're ever, I think for anybody watching, if you're ever captivated by somebody, step outside yourself and think about what it is that they're doing to just garner your attention. So
Yeah.
much a different, just like write it down. Oh, they told this story,
Interestingly enough, some of the people who keep my attention the most are just masters of silence. Like they get up there and they don't say anything, but it's not this contrived and fake silence. They are really thinking about what they're going to say. And I'm like hanging like ready. And so you contrast that with somebody who in their first 30 seconds says something that is compelling and captivating and gets your emotions going. I'm just more naturally the person who's going to try to tap into excitable emotions in the first 30 seconds. So I think that's a key point that I wanted to make too, is that you have to be true to who you are uniquely designed to be. I don't think you should go on stage. All of us perform a little bit, but not so much that you're doing something just completely different than who you are. It's exhausting.
Yeah.
Who wants to do that? I don't know.
I think what you're saying is really powerful. Like, the more authentic you can bring into the presentation, like things that make you giggle, things that are quirky about you, and then you can always have them fit the message that you're giving.
Yeah.
Like, we can play a fun game where you give us a word and we can turn it into an empathy word or a curiosity word,
Yeah.
But just like think about, for the people listening, your own presentations and how you can add just a little bit more of like, here's a picture of my pets that I care about, my family, just a little bit more of your authentic you to help you connect with people.
I did have another question for you. Do you leave space for spontaneity in your speeches, or do you kind of have the whole thing kind of?
Yeah, I think that is the secret to co-creating a presentation. So in the book, that's actually one of the 5 tools. Co-creation is an act of seduction, according to Oliver Stone. Isn't that a great quote?
I like it.
And so I think the way I think about speeches is there are chunks of the presentation where I honestly have no idea what's going to happen. I hope it'll go one way, but it goes in a little bit different direction in every presentation. But that makes it special for the audience involved. So I like to have chunks like that in it because it feels more like we're doing something together and they're involved and then they're paying attention. And it's all about attention.
Yeah. Now you and I talked about our love of comedy a little
Yes.
before we got
Right
on.
before.
Yeah. And I think extemporaneous kind of improv comedy helps you be a better public speaker. Not that you need to be funny necessarily, but just that idea of playing off of what somebody else gives you,
Yes.
helpful to your presentation. How have you used comedy or improv to help with your presentation?
Somebody said to me once, after they laugh, they listen.
And
I feel like I could just like put a tattoo on my body of that. Do you know what I'm saying? It's so powerful. If you watch people after they've finished laughing, they lean forward and listen for the next thing.
You're like, what else?
Yeah. And so I do think you have to be funny. I mean, no pressure on people just joining us, but like think about where you can make some levity in the conversation, because after they laugh, they will listen. And so I purposefully like since COVID, I think people are so distracted by so many things that we need to add more humor to our presentation. So I have taken out some content, like some of the, I don't know, hardcore lessons that I have, and replace them with, I call it jibber jabber nonsense, but it's fun and it gets people engaged, and then it gets them to pay attention to the next part.
What about, do you get your audience physically moving at all?
We do one thing together in the curiosity speech where, again, this is like, I try to get them to think about saying to themselves the things that I'm sharing. So I talk about blind spots, and I ask them a series of questions of whether they think they're good at this or that. And then one of the things I ask is like, are you good at breathing? And people are like, what? Of course, I'm obviously good at breathing. And then I say, okay, well, let's do an experiment together. You stand up, we're all going to take a breath together, and we'll see, like, you'll put one hand on your chest, one on your stomach, and you'll see which one moves when you take a breath. And room usually is divided half and half. Now everybody's standing up, everybody takes a breath in unison. And when that happens, it's like a magic void of sound space. You know, when we all take a breath together, it's a very powerful moment. Not just the breathing, but just like the silence, you know, just like you were talking about. And then I have them vote, like which hand moved more. And it's usually 50-50. And so half the room is doing it the wrong way. And when they came into the presentation, they thought they had breathing down. Like that was the least of their problems. Yeah. Right. So if I can show them that, boy, there are some things that you think you've got down, like breathing. Maybe there's some other things about your work that you think you have down, but may not. And then they start wondering, oh, I wonder what that could be, you know? And so I do think having them do an exercise and then think about the impact of it is very powerful. How about you?
I typically don't have people move, but my keynotes they tend to be shorter. That's one thing I could be better at, actually, getting people to move. You know why I don't, though?
Tell me.
I had a situation one time, and it's one of these things, like this one thing happens and then forever you're nervous about it. I had a person who was in a wheelchair, and I asked people to stand up. And it was a small group. And then I was like, oh, I didn't think through that. And I saw him the whole time. So it wasn't like I didn't see him, and it wasn't like I didn't know it was coming. And I was able to adjust the instructions. But I think my own personal embarrassment has caused me to steer clear of anything now that is like, move your body, close your, I don't know.
Yeah. I had a traumatic thing happen to me in a speech. Just share with you. I asked for volunteers for a segment, like to do an exercise together where I didn't know what was going to happen. And that person who volunteered immediately started bawling afterwards and cried through the rest of the speech. And it was one of those things where I did the same keynote 3 times in a row for this client. It was like a lot of people there. And this was after the second one. And I went to my hotel room and just cried. Like, I was like, I don't even know if I could do this again.
Diana, you made the lady cry? Or
it wasn't me. It was like she had other stuff happening, you know? And it had nothing to do with me, but I was on the receiving end of that situation, you know? And I just remember how horrible I felt about
So,
it.
so what'd you do for the third one? How'd you recover?
Ugh. I I mean, I don't remember, but I did it. I did it, but it was not my best.
Yeah.
You know? How do you which brings me to a great question. How do you give a great presentation, and how important is your energy to a presentation even if you're not feeling your all?
Yeah. So right before we got on this morning, you asked people to submit questions, and also please feel free to submit questions now because we do have space and time for those. And someone said, "What's the difference between virtual and in person? How do we prepare differently?" Virtual is harder for me because what I'm trying to do is talk to one. It's like you're talking to one person.
Mhm.
So it doesn't matter how many people are on the line. You have to remember that you're talking directly to one person because they're probably sitting in a room by themselves listening to you. Whereas in person, if you've got 1,000 people in the room, you're talking to thousands of people, not
Yeah.
necessarily one person. And I can feel the energy of my crowd. And I think that's good and bad. The bad part is if you have a crowd, and I've had this before, a crowd of judges and lawyers who are trained to be neutral and yes, and not give you anything.
Yeah.
And they showed up that day that same way, like unwilling to raise their hand, unwilling to, I mean, on some of the most benign questions. And so, in that regard, but then go to a sales meeting, right? And everybody's like, yes, let's
It's the
turn up.
best.
Yeah,
Yes.
let's turn up. In that regard, I think the energy thing is kind of, it's hard to get it
So do
externally.
you need to bring more energy to a virtual like when you're
It, it,
doing a meeting?
it takes me more energy
Yeah.
inside. But I absolutely reel it down. I mean, it'd be weird to be like, "Oh my God, today, let's talk about," that's odd on a virtual
That's me. That's
platform.
how I do it. That's that's so funny. I love a good controversy. Here we are. I wanted us to have a debate on this.
Oh, okay. So let's do it. By the
Um,
way, Courtney says we
I
both have magnetic energy.
I feel like you have to bring more energy to a virtual presentation because there's so many more ways for them to lose interest in the conversation, you know?
Yeah.
And the reason, gosh, I never thought about it until you just said it, is you're not giving one presentation to 100 people, you're giving a one-on-one presentation 100 times. And so you need to have that one-on-one connection, and that's why you need to bring more to a
Yeah.
virtual than
Well,
in
I'm more
person.
tired, that's for sure. I can tell you that at the end of a virtual presentation, I'm exhausted. I'm like,
How
"Woo."
do you get ready? So how do you this is a good question for everybody. Like, how do you prepare your energy like before a presentation? Don't just be like, "Oh, I got a presentation in 10 minutes. Let me just now get ready for it." That's not how you and I do it.
No. In fact, the core tenets of my presentation don't change. And I'm always trying to make sure that those are really, really clear. I also think about my audience and what their general personality is. And sometimes you can't know that, but I mean, you do kind of know what's the gender makeup, what's the age makeup of the audience. I know if I'm talking to children versus if I'm talking to an adult. So, as an example, or sometimes I'm in faith-based communities, which, a well-placed Christian joke will get you a long way. um, and so, when I'm preparing, what I am truly trying to clarify in my heart is if I were on the other side of this and I paid and I'm, even if just in my time, which is very valuable, how would I want to be treated? Because let me tell you, sometimes like today, it looks like we have 7 people watching live. If this were a paid thing, I'd be like, oh my God, 7 people, you're like, so like, what? But you got to talk to the 7 just like you would talk to the 7,000. You've got to give people what they came for because time is not money. You can never get your time back. And so I just always like to remind myself and ground myself in that people are giving me this one thing that they can never, ever, ever get back. and that's their time. And I just center myself in how I can be there for them. But, I mean, since you've been disagreeing with me so far, you might as well
Yeah.
disagree with me again if you.
No, I would just say I like to think about it like I need to suck energy from the world to give back to the audience. So like before I get on a presentation, I listen to my favorite music. Like
Oh,
I get pumped up, I get going. I'm ready for a dance party so that I can't like sit like this and then summon energy out of nowhere. Like you need to suck it in first to give it to the audience.
and so did you do that today? Like, did you listen to your dance party
Every
music?
time, because I feel, my natural state is like we talked about at the very beginning, just quiet and like I like to think about stuff, which is not a great way to come across.
Yeah, well, I think we have different kind of personalities in that way, which I think is important for people to know. Know yourself very well so that you know how you can show up. We got another question here.
Great.
Tell us about the talk you gave that left you with your most memorable takeaway. Generally speaking, you are there to impart wisdom on others, but tell us about a time you gained wisdom from others because of or through your talk. Now it's a good one.
You want to go first?
No, you should go first.
Most of my insight happens before the presentation when I'm researching the company or the audience, and I'm like, oh, I didn't know that existed. That's really cool. And then I try to bring that level of curiosity and ideas to the session. I think even if you're giving a presentation to an organization where you work, you can still do that level of background research and come up with something that surprised you in your preparation. And that makes the presentation better.
I love it. I think the most memorable times for me is when I'm walking into a space where I think the people do not care about the topic. That happens to me often. I think many of the people who know me, who are watching, know that I'm at the intersection of the space between inclusion and empathy and good leadership. Like they all kind of run together. And sometimes I'm in spaces talking about inclusion, and I know the people have brought me to try to convince people that inclusion is good for them. And in those times, what stands out to me the most is when someone comes up to me full of emotion at the end to say, I didn't even want to be here, and you have shifted the way I'm thinking about this topic. And that, I always remember those people. I always remember those people because, it's nice to talk to people who are like, yes, empathy for the world. But it's the person who comes up to me after and says, gosh, I'm going to give this a try. Thank you for encouraging me. So Marvin Lyman says that he's never known you not to be high energy.
Yeah, I turned it around.
Yeah, see?
That's how I leave the house.
Look at that. And then Cassie wants to know if you're going to share your playlist for your hype songs.
Oh, it's public. It's on my YouTube. I have a workout playlist that I listen to beforehand. Yeah.
Well, it's good that you mentioned your workout playlist because people want to know if you do handstands or super long. Now, what's the longest plank you've done?
11 and a half minutes.
I mean, is that mental or what?
I think it's like anything. Nobody ever trains for the plank. So if you train for it, you could do an 11-minute plank. Like nobody tries. I'm just telling you, you could do it.
How long was your plank before you?
1.5 minutes. Like
okay.
Nothing. It's like anything. You give me a topic, I'll bring it back to the one that we're talking about, yes. Which is you think you're doing pretty good, but you don't even know what world is possible until you apply. So like in terms of, I wanted to do this webinar because I know how much the ROI is for the people listening of like what increasing their communication skills can do for them. Mm-hmm. And I have a coach that I work with on presentations. I feel like I will tell you in my head, I'm like out of a 10, I'm a 4 out of 10 are where I could be. Mm-hmm. But that gives me the space to
grow and develop. Yeah. Cause there are people who are like, oh, Nicole, you're amazing. But every Friday I have a person who calls me after my lives to tell me if he thought I made the relevant points, if he thought my callback was decent or not, if he thought I talked too long. Like he is there to be my critic and I welcome it.
And do you know this person, or is it just somebody random?
No, no,
I'm
no. I
kidding.
know him. I know him. I know him well enough for him to have my personal cell phone number. And he called. In fact, he called right before this. I think he wanted to know. Now, why are you talking about speaking instead of empathy? I know that's what he wants to know.
We're talking about empathy. You tell
We,
him.
we are. Well,
We're
he'll
on
get to see
message.
it. He'll get to see that we are on brand.
I think the point that we're both making is how powerful outside perspectives are to getting better at this craft. It is not one that I think you can judge like solely on your own how you could get better. It's just difficult.
If you're speaking with impact, it's because other people think you are, not because you think you are.
Yeah.
Yeah. Other people have to be shifting. Do we have we had one more question that came in from LinkedIn today? Do you remember?
Tell me how you do your slides. How many words on a slide? Like how you think about your slides in general.
Oh, well, for me, it's really easy. I think in pictures. So I hardly ever have words on the slides until I'm getting to my 3 points. And I try not to have more than 3. But then my 3 points, I have those words. But otherwise, if I'm talking about leadership, it is an image that evokes in the mind the concept of leadership, and that's it. Words on the slides tend to just be distracting to me. And I'd rather people kind of think about whatever leadership means to them instead of me telling them necessarily. So I like to leave space, but I'm basing it on this foundational idea I have which is people already know. I just need to help them do what they know.
Yeah.
And so from that position, I'm not doing a bunch of teaching from the stage. I'm really just reminding people of things they've maybe gotten away from.
So I think that's 2 really powerful things that you said. I completely agree on the slides. I don't usually have any words. People are like, can we have a printout of your slides? I'm like, it's 100 pictures that will make no sense to your team. But I do like to have a quote or something to emphasize a point that I make, every now and then. But it's usually just photos, which you can use to make people laugh as a punchline to something that you're saying. And then the other really important point that you were making about leaving space, I think that is the key to having a great interaction, not just like silence on your presentation. Like now let's pause for a minute for everyone to reflect on what's happening, but leaving space in what you're talking about for them to come to it on your own, and how you think about yourself. Third point, as not like, well, I'm smart, I figured this out, I'm going to teach them how to do it.
Yeah.
But really, like, how can you make them the hero?
Yeah, the hero in the story.
Yes.
Yeah.
You're not the hero.
Yeah, you're not the hero. You're the aside. You're the
you're the silly, like I want to be the comic relief, like laugh at my pain and learn your own lessons.
Yeah.
Like I want to be the same as you, like a reflection of what they already know to be true.
Cynthia, whose last name is Smart, by the way, which I like, she wants to know, why did you use a picture of Snoop in your presentation? And I want to know that too.
Yeah. So I start with a picture of Snoop, and then I say, like, what's he up to? And everybody in the audience will shout out things that Snoop Dogg is doing, which is like 1,000 things.
Yeah.
And then after they're done, we've exhausted the audience. Then I show them like 10 more things that Snoop is doing that they had no idea, that are like amazing. Okay. And then I put up a picture of Vanilla Ice, and I say, who's this? And usually like a lot fewer people know. And then I say, what's he up to? And they're like, home remodeling. It's not as good. It's like one thing and then nothing. And I love those 2 as a comparison to one another, because they both were extremely successful 30 years ago in the 90s. Vanilla Ice at one point outselling Snoop Dogg. They're both very hardworking, very talented, and yet one of them is more relevant to every generation, like no matter what age group that I'm talking about. And one of them is like, hey, remember 30 years ago when I did
Ice baby?
Yeah, you remember that? That was cool. Let's relive that moment that I had.
Yeah.
And that's how I think about innovation, like the difference between the 2, because they have the same ingredients.
Yeah.
I love studying these 2, and And I want other people to think about how we can have all the ingredients, the intellect, the talent, even the luck at the beginning to get success. But that doesn't mean that in 30 years, you're just as good or even better as you were 30 years ago.
That iteration is necessary. I got to tell you, I'm trying to think of a way for me to wear one of Snoop Dogg's outfits on stage. I have not figured that out just yet.
I'm sure he's about to start a fashion line to help you out.
He has one.
Yes.
He does. But the outfits are kind of, I don't know. I don't know how I could pull it off on stage. I'm trying to figure that out. Maybe with some heels.
Okay. Any other questions that we've missed from the audience? I could do this.
Let's see. Somebody wants to know, where can we purchase books? And mine are available on Amazon, Target, Barnes & Noble. What about you?
Yeah, I think Amazon's the best place. If you go to gobigorgohomebook.com, it'll take you right to it. How's that?
Go big or go home.
Book.
Good. Book. Go big or go home.
It'll take you right to the purchase page.
Perfect.
Yeah. What can your book help them do, Dr. Nicole? What's the promise of your book?
I believe that while the world needs more empathy, that a logical approach to empathy will help us make better decisions and drive more accountability in every aspect of our lives. It sounds like it's to help other people, but I swear if you do the things in this book, it's going to help you.
How is it going to help me? Because I think about me.
Yeah. Well, it's perfect. It's a perfect question, because I don't know that I would have been able to convince me of that before.
Okay.
In fact, my first chapter is why I might be the worst person to tell anybody about empathy. Like that's the first chapter, because you would not have been able to get me to do this. But I think the way is, if you think about empathy as a tool to help you understand people better, in what ways does understanding not help you make better decisions and be able to move in a way that drives motivation in others? And so that's my singular idea. And I used to think about empathy as a weakness, as a way to allow people to step down instead of step up. And I tell all the stories about how I got that wrong. So
I think it's so important when you're giving a presentation to start from that foundation. I think that most people who are the most confident at their presentation skills are grossly disconnected from their audience and how they're being perceived by their audience.
Oh, really?
Yes. I think the people that are just like, killed it. That was amazing.
Oh, I gotcha. Yeah. I'm usually walking away going, that was good, but I could have done this and this. Yeah.
Like the people that have empathy and care about their audience are thinking about all the different ways they could be better next time.
Oh, yes.
And because they could feel moments, from their audience. In fact, one way I get empathy for my audience is sometimes when I give a talk, I'll record the audience as opposed to myself. So I can hear myself on the microphone, but what I'm watching, and when you're presenting, you can't really see everybody's face because you're in the zone, I completely blank out. Like I leave, I'm like, I don't know what happened. But the video afterwards let me see how many people were on their cell phones versus how many I thought were, how many people laughed at the funny things, and then that lets me know what I can improve.
How do you use questions at the end to gauge your audience engagement? Because I tend to think if I don't get questions, people weren't all in.
Oh, yeah. I have a great tool for this, actually.
Yeah. Okay, tell me about it.
So I do a top 10 list with the audience at the end. So I want to co-create with them, like I told you. And I say, okay, I don't do what you do every day. I know this stuff is fundamental. It applies, but I don't exactly know how. So let's make a list together of 10 different things we can do at work after this presentation to put this into practice, or just ahas that you had from this presentation. And then it's like really easy to get people to.
I remember that. You have a slide that says 10 things.
Yeah. I love 10 things.
Oh, yeah. I remember that. I remember that now. Mm-hmm.
But then, and then it gives you an opportunity. This is again about co-creation. They'll say something, and then it gives me an opportunity to deliver more content. But then it feels like we're just having a conversation, like it's impromptu,
I like that. I might steal that. Now, the other thing I might steal is, how the heck do you record your audience? How do you
Oh,
do
I
that?
just put my iPhone on a stand at the very beginning. I hit record.
And you have it just up there in front of your thing?
Oh,
Your
no, I
phone?
just have it, like, in the front of the room, off to the
Oh,
side,
I got you. Okay. And so
and they can't see because they see the camera, they
I
don't see that. Yeah.
yeah, I like that because I think I would like to look later to see what people in the audience are thinking. So before we go, let's leave
Yeah.
people with kind of our main ideas. Let
Well,
me
the big finish, let me say this. I
oh
think your finish is just as important as your beginning.
yeah.
And I don't think enough people think about that. I think a lot of people, when they finish, they're like,
Thank you so
well,
much.
that's it. That's it. Or like, does anyone have any questions? No. Okay, thank you. So how do you think about the finish and making it as memorable as the beginning?
I leave people with the most profound quote I can think of at the end of my presentation because I'm trying to leave
Yes.
thing. I'm trying to leave them up and out.
Yes, of course.
And it's usually about them and my belief in their ability to do these ridiculous things in the world. Um, and I lean into this voice that I feel I've been given to make people feel that.
Yes. I couldn't agree more. So I do the top 10 list at the end, but it kind of ends in an energy lull. It's kind of quiet. Everybody's, they're not upbeat. And then I say, okay, let me just finish with this one last story. And I think the end is your opportunity to tell one story that brings it all together, one quote that is impactful, where you can da 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 with your voice and be like, this is why it's important. And this is why you can do it. And this is why I believe in you. And if you're not finishing your presentations that way, then you're losing a huge opportunity. That's what they're going to remember.
I tell you, one of my thought partners, my chief thought partner, actually ends with his stories with this like heart wrenching. Everybody's crying, and he doesn't really say. He tells that story, and he just kind of stands there with his spine straight at the end. And I'm telling you, I have seen people in line. I mean, dozens and dozens and dozens to just talk about how they're going to approach education differently because of his story at the end. So that is a profound point that the end is as important, if not more important than the beginning.
Let me finish with this. This will be my last concluding thought. A lot of people say when they give presentations, this is how I want people to feel after my presentation. And nobody feels anything for an hour. We feel things for like a split second. That's how feelings go, right? So you need to be thinking about in your presentations when they're going to actually feel something. You need to be able to say at this minute mark, they're going to feel something because I'm going to do this. And if you don't know when those spikes are in your presentation, then you might not have any.
Oh.
So think about when your moments of emotion and connection with the audience actually happen, and don't have too many minutes without anything.
Will you show your chart
My
again?
map again.
Show your map again. And then can we share the map with people, or is it in the book?
Yeah, I actually have a worksheet that they can use. If you email me, Diana@dianacandor.com, I'll send you the worksheet that I use with this map. So you'll get a blank one that you can fill out, but also some tools and guides. So what you can do in the first 30 seconds, how you think about the end, and then magic things you can do in the middle.
Here, I did
Putting it in the chat.
Well, I was asking you beforehand, or we were going to do it, but we got it now. There you go. So you can go to her website at Diana@dianacandor.com, and or you can email her, and then that way you can get that, because that's good. And then Marvin, we know you know how to spell, so we're not going to hold it against you. Autocorrect, gotcha. That's good. That's good. Well, if anyone ever has any questions at all about leadership, empathy, and inclusion, I believe that leadership is not anything if it's not empathetic and inclusive. Feel free to reach out. I actually like it when people pick my brain. So, and I'm going to take this as my opportunity that when I have questions, Diana says that I can call her too. And y'all all heard it live and in living color.
I very much enjoyed picking your brain today. I feel like I walked away with a lot of nuggets. So thank you.
Well, it was so much fun, and we are going to leave with Cynthia Smart's comment. Thank you. I need all the help I can get. Love you all so much. Thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate you.